So, anyway, I'm in Philly and I was wandering around a museum with one of my oldest friends from college. And I said to her, I have to tell you something. I feel like I don't fit in my own country anymore.
Mm.
My whole insides have shifted. So I sound the same. I look the same. I make jokes the same, but I feel differently
Mm.
about many things.
Hi, welcome back. Welcome to another episode of what I call Living Abroad, Looking Within. Today we have a really special chat with Jane. I recommend that you don't lose the last 2 minutes of this conversation. Before we get there, let me tell you one more thing. When people subscribe to the channel, that gives me the option to reach more people and tells YouTube that people are enjoying the content. So if you are, please subscribe to the channel. I'll very much appreciate it. Thank you. How are you doing?
Well, in and of itself, just fine. It's sad to see NATO ripped to shreds and Ukraine on its own and
Mm.
Vladimir Putin laughing, the Chinese laughing, the Europeans crying.
Mm.
And I don't know how the Argentinians feel, but they have their own problems.
We have tango, so we tend to cry more than anything, I would think. Melancholy is part of it. The first question I always ask, I know you went to live abroad years ago. What was it that the first time you left your country, what was it the thing? What made you leave your country behind that time?
Well, okay. So originally, I got to spend a year doing a master's degree in London at
Okay.
the London School of Economics. And I loved London. So when I wrapped up the degree, I tried very hard to remain in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
A new newspaper was being launched
Mm-hmm.
called The Independent. It was a new newspaper back then. And anyway, I interviewed, but I didn't have any serious journalism experience, and I had to return home. So I come home, found work in journalism, did that, started out in magazines, and then jumped to wire services. And the wire service I worked for had bureaus in Europe.
Mm.
And the gentleman running the London bureau liked to go to the pub pretty early. He liked to knock off work at 4 o'clock. So they knew they'd need a new bureau chief, and they asked me if I would consider going, and I said yes. Because I saw immediately
Mm-hmm.
that would be an amazing stepping stone, career wise, and not to mention, come on, London, being able to get on a plane and go to Rome for the day if I felt like it, or again, hop on a train and go see friends in Wales for the day. It how could come on, who passes that up? So that's what first got me abroad to
Okay.
work.
Give me like a picture. I know you lived in London, you lived in other places in Europe,
Tokyo.
in Asia.
So I was in London 5 years working, and I
Oh, okay.
put in paperwork for my British passport. And around the time I did that, someone in our Tokyo office quit. And I overheard the gentleman calling my boss. My boss sat directly opposite me. I overheard the whole phone call.
Mm.
So I knew the gentleman was resigning. And I listened very carefully. And as soon as the call ended, I said to my boss, "Did Neil just quit?" And my boss said, "Yes, I can't believe it." I said, "Can I have his job?"
Wow.
He said, "Would you please let me digest this for 5 minutes before you hit me up for his job?" And I said, "Well, I think that would be amazing job experience because very few women get the opportunity to head a department in any kind of company in Japan or any more, shall we say, patriarchal society. And Asia's full of them."
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, that led to extensive negotiations on compensation package, salary, everything, and anything you can imagine. And I ended up getting that position, moved to Tokyo for 2 years. No, I love Tokyo. I didn't love the Tokyo office. That's a
Mhm.
long story. I won't get
Okay.
into it, but I knew I liked Asia and I wanted to extend my time there. I tried to interview for jobs in Hong Kong. None of them were quite right. And then, literally 10 days before my Tokyo contract was ending, very conveniently, a young lady in our Paris office
Mhm.
resigned.
Wow.
I know. I called her to thank her. I said, just so you know, I'm putting in for a transfer to Paris. She said, oh, do enjoy yourself. It is wonderful here. And I said, thanks, Christelle. So off she went to Credit Lyonnais. And
Mm.
I took a demotion just so I could be in Paris. So I was there a year,
Mhm.
came home for Christmas. And then this is now going to open up a whole different discussion, I think,
Okay.
because you go abroad for career or personal reasons, but you still have family back in the United States or your
Mm.
home country,
Yeah.
and they get older and things change and there are life events. Already, I had missed seeing my nephews and niece
Mm.
grow up. I missed dance recitals and graduations with my friends from university. I missed more weddings than I attended. It's a mixed bag, as you know.
Mm.
But anyway, my point is this: my sister picked me up at the airport, and as we pulled into my mother's driveway, she said, you need to prepare yourself because mom has aged a lot in the past year. And on cue, the front door swung open, and for a split second, I thought my grandmother was standing there,
Wow.
but she was dead. And I realized, oi, it was my mother. She'd gone white. She was now using a cane. She hadn't mentioned this to me on, I used to call home every Monday.
Mm.
She never told me that. Um, so my sister saw my face and she said, we're going to have a chat while you're here because I'm not doing this alone. And I knew what she meant.
Mm.
So that began the process for me of accepting the fact that maybe I wouldn't be able to be abroad forever.
Mm.
And it took me about a year to untangle myself from a lease in Paris and a job and to make the arrangements to come back to the United States. But in aggregate, I was away 10 years working
Mhm.
plus another year for grad school.
A question from the time you were there. Did you have to learn to speak Japanese or French, or did you know already?
The company in Tokyo, the company did two things for me.
Mm.
They'd also brought over a British gentleman to be head of sales. So they arranged for an acculturation
Mm.
teacher
Okay.
to have sessions with us the first week we were there. So we learned what not to do. I mean, there's so many unspoken rules in Japanese society. And she said point blank to the British guy, you, being from Europe, will have a far easier time
Mm.
fitting in Japan than Jane will. The Americans are rambunctious, in your face, actually say what they're thinking, and the British know how to edit themselves. So yeah, he fit in right away. Now here's what I noticed though. When my Japanese colleagues learned that I was taking language lessons, which I'll get to in a second, plus I took cooking classes
Mm.
with the Martha Stewart of Tokyo, Kanishi-san. And I also took ikebana classes. For those who don't
Wow.
know, ikebana is Japanese flower arranging, and it's very stylized. And the roots of ikebana are in Buddhist philosophy.
Mm.
Going back though to the language lessons, my Takahara-san, my sensei
Mhm.
teacher, would come to the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3:30 after the Japanese stock market had closed. And we would take up an empty office. Japanese is a tough language. The structure is similar to German with the verb always at the end.
Hmm.
So it really just twists your head around if you're a Yank and you're like, yo, how's it? There's English and then there's the American unstructured approach to English. So to go from that to a highly stylized, formalized language, it was very, very difficult. It took me 6 months to string a grammatically correct
Wow.
sentence together. Very tough. But I learned, and Takahara-san was exceedingly patient. Now, unbeknownst to me, the wall in our little cubicle, the CFO for the company was on the other side of the wall. And apparently it pained him to hear my Japanese. And he would get up and go for a long tea break. Anyway, after the first 6 months, it was the Christmas party in the office. We went to an onsen, actually, a Japanese spring resort, and hot spring. And he came up to me after a few sakes and said, Jane-san, you're Japanese. Much better now. Much better now. And then he wandered off.
Did you have any adaptation issue in London or Paris?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So London as a student, we were all equals. You know, the London School of Economics is as international as it gets. My program had, golly, only 4 Brits in it. So there were a couple of Canadians, a Polish guy, a gentleman from Malta, a Norwegian, a Swiss, 2 Germans. Out of 24 people, it was very international. So we had no problem connecting with one another, going to the pub together, whatever. Being there as a working person is a very different experience because many Londoners have their friends, excuse me, already. They may have family in the area. Inviting you out to the pub is not a priority. In fact, it's not on their radar. So, truth be told, it took more than 1 year for any British person to invite me to anything. That includes for a beer,
Wow.
a drink after work,
Yeah.
going to an art gallery, anything. I had to entertain myself for a year. And then finally, a woman who ended up becoming one of my best friends, she was a journalist for then Knight Ridder, and Knight Ridder no longer exists. But she said, so what do you do with yourself when you're not in the bureau? And I said, oh, I do this and I do that. And she said, but what about your friends? And I said, oh, I have a few friends around from grad school, but a lot of them are back in their home countries. She said, oh, for goodness sakes, we must address this. You must come for dinner. So next thing I know, she pulled together this dinner party comprised of a lot of other journalists in the city. And that was my first entree into British society. But it took a year. Now, Paris, when I moved there, I actually had a good friend there who ironically used to work for me. So glad I was good to her. But anyway, Barbara would have me over every Sunday night. She called it family dinner. I'd bring the booze. She would cook dinner. And then again, I tapped into her network of friends. Again, tons of journalists. But Barbara, in another life, had been a dancer until she was injured. And she had to give up her dance career and she entered journalism, initially covering dance and then branching out into business and economics journalism. Very bright lady. Anyway, I tapped into her network. She knew a ton of people in the arts, plus journalism. And her husband, Joël, had been in way upper management with Societe Generale.
Mm.
He opened branches of that bank in Oman. Where else? London. They'd been expats.
Mm.
So he had an interesting network of friends as well. So I think one of the keys is if you move somewhere,
Mhm.
it's always helpful if you know at least one or two people. And if they're great people know other great people. You tap into that network, you will have friends and a
Mm.
support system.
That's
And
great.
of course, people who are morons tend to know other morons. If all you know is a moron in a city, don't move there. You'll regret it.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you. Let's see if anything else comes to mind. Because you've been to different places and different cultures and everything.
Mm.
If someone watching was thinking about going somewhere else, do you have any advice for someone that's thinking about going to another country besides the one that you just gave?
I would say, first of all, make sure you've traveled there first. Don't just go somewhere thinking you're going to like it from a YouTube video or the
Okay.
fact your best friend liked it. You want to do reconnaissance.
Mm.
You know, cultures are different, um, ways of living are different. You know, I'm sure you've seen this. A guy from Stockholm, I believe it was, put up a picture of the apartment building he lives in with a tour of his apartment on YouTube. And the Americans piled on and said, "How can you live in such a tiny space?
Mm.
Oh my God." And I just thought, because that's what's normal for them.
Mm.
They don't expect big cars, big homes, big lawns, and big bills. It's just a different way of living. I mean, I often look around the United States and I wonder how much of this do we really need, and how much of it is a lifestyle idea that we're buying into.
Mm.
It's I would say do your reconnaissance. Please don't expect the whole world to use English with you. Be willing to learn the language. You've got to meet people where they are, and you have to accept it's their culture and you're entering it, not the other way around. So, depending where you go, you have to be willing to give up your expectations, your cultural framework to fit in with where you're going. And that not everybody's built that way.
I would 100% agree with that. One question that I had when you were talking about going back to the US, sometimes I feel like people, especially if they live abroad for a while, when they come back to even though it's their home, they
It's
have to
reentry
adapt
shock.
back too. Did that happen to you?
I had terrible reentry shock.
Hmm.
You know, to be gone 10 years, and I'd been living in 3 foreign capitals in that time. I remember I made the decision to move to Philadelphia, not New York. My mom was still with us then, and she was flabbergasted I would choose Philadelphia over New York. And I said, believe it or not, Center City is a lot like New York, but it's half the price. So, anyway, I'm in Philly and I was wandering around a museum with one of my oldest friends from college. And because I'd been abroad, I'd missed her wedding, I'd missed the birth of her children. So we're talking at length and catching up, and I said to her, I have to tell you something. I feel like I don't fit in my own country anymore.
Hmm.
My whole insides have shifted. So I sound the same, I look the same, I make jokes the same, but I feel differently
Hmm.
about many things. The importance of a balanced life, free time, social support for human beings. I've seen the benefits being in Europe. Above all, healthcare. It's not a privilege, it is a human right,
Hmm.
despite what many people here believe. I don't think anyone should go bankrupt. because they can't afford to fight their cancer. I said, and here's the other thing I can't get used to. I never realized how loud everybody is here. Loud. Everything's loud. And I had to reacclimate to my own culture. And it took months. It really did.
One thing that you touched on, I was going to ask you. I sometimes ask this question. I feel like when you start living in different places, especially when you move the first time, everything around you changes. The culture, the habits, the food, the music. And I start to feel like eventually you change as well. It's not just the things around you. So I guess the question was going to be, how did living abroad changed you? But you kind of touched on that, but I don't know if you want to expand on anything.
Oh, I learned to be flexible, accepting, not judging. It's allowed me to travel the planet and go to a lot of countries dramatically different from the US. You know, places in the world where women have to cloak themselves just to leave the house. And you become more accepting of the fact the world is not your home country. It's your home country is your leaping off point. It's your base, but it's not the whole world. And if everybody understood that there's so many ways to live and there's no right, no wrong, only cultural differences, I think we would all be much better off.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm always disappointed when certain countries like to impose their way of living, thinking, and being on other places. As we have seen multiple times, when the US tries to impose its own cultural thinking or political beliefs elsewhere, it usually fails. And I wish we would learn that valuable lesson. That's my philosophical point for the day.
A long way to go, I think. Can I ask you one more last question?
You can ask me all the questions you want.
The last question is always the same. The first one and the last one are always the same. And it's kind of a subtle tribute to immigrants and where we come from and where we're going. That's why I repeat them always. And the last question is, based on your experiences and how you feel, in your own words, what's an immigrant? How would you define an immigrant?
An immigrant is someone who may not have been born in a particular country, but they have found themselves to be of use in that country. They might be of economic use, spiritual use, social use, or all three. And I've been an immigrant 3 times. I don't know how useful I was, but I hope that I was. And I know in Japan in particular, a lot of Japanese women told me that they were really thrilled I was there because very few women, I was the first woman in all of Asia to do my role. I ran a bond research department, and I didn't realize I was the first woman in all of Asia to do that. And the reason I learned is because a newspaper, the Nihon Keizai Shimbun, the Wall Street Journal of Japan, called me out of the blue one day to interview me. And I said, are you sure? They said, yes, we have called many places. Yes, we know, we are sure. So, yeah. You always serve a purpose by being there. And I don't care if you're there to pick fruit or pick bonds to invest in. You are making a contribution. And that's an immigrant.
Nice. I love it.
I loved our conversation, Jane. Thank you very much. And for you on the other side, I told you before, but you can still do it. Subscribe to the channel. Every time someone subscribes, it's telling YouTube that you care about this content, that you like it. And that means other folks can benefit from it. For now, I'll say thanks to you as well, and I'll see you on the next video.